At a crowded restaurant, a black waitress is struggling through a hectic shift, doing everything she can to afford the bills and her mother's medication. But even in the midst of stress and exhaustion, she takes the time to gently help and encourage an injured young girl, someone the rest of the room seems to have forgotten. What she doesn't realize is that the girl's father is sitting just a few tables away, silently watching, and soon he'll make a decision that will turn her entire world upside down, in the best way possible. The sound of shattering glass sliced through the soft clatter of dinnerware and quiet jazz floating through the sapphire table. A polished restaurant nestled in the historic district of Cambridge, Massachusetts. For a brief second, time stalled. Conversations paused, forks hovered mid-air, and several heads turned in unison toward the source of the disruption. Tiana Hughes was already kneeling, her hands moving quickly to collect the pieces of the broken water glass that now sparkled like ice on the black and white tile floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she swept the largest shards into her apron, her dark brown skin flushed with embarrassment. Her name tag, slightly tilted on her chest, read, "Tiana, server." She was tall, about 5'9", with smooth skin, tight coils of black hair pulled back into a bun, and sharp features that often made people assume she was younger than her 28 years, but nothing about her life felt young anymore. Her navy buhl work uniform was neat but faded at the seams. Her shoes, black non-slip sneakers, were worn through at the soles. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers were lined with faint burn scars and calluses, the kind you get from years of hot plates, tray balancing, and shift doubles. Across the dining room, Darren Klein, her manager, stood with his arms folded and his permanent frown pressed deeper into his pale, round face. He was a man in his 40s who wore his authority like cologne, too heavy, and only for show. "Third one this month, Hughes," he barked, his voice loud enough for the nearest 4 tables to hear. "That's coming out of your check." Tiana didn't respond. She kept her eyes on the floor, nodding once, careful not to show her humiliation. A couple nearby pretended to read the wine list. A man stirred his soup a little too intently. "Sorry, Darren. Won't happen again," she said, standing slowly, brushing glass dust from her knees. She turned toward the trash bin without looking up, swallowing the bitterness like old coffee. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with rent due on Monday, not with her mother's medication costing $800 a month, even after insurance. At 28, Tiana had never planned on being a waitress. 4 years earlier, she'd been halfway through her second year at Harvard Medical School, white coat crisp, stethoscope always on hand. She had ranked in the top of her class, particularly in pediatric neurology, where her professors had taken notice. "Your presence calms the kids before you even speak," her advisor, Dr. Rodman, had told her once. "That's not something we can teach." She remembered that moment often, especially during nights like this. Long shifts filled with aching feet, lukewarm food, and customers who wouldn't even look her in the eye. All of it had ended the night her mother collapsed in their kitchen, a bowl of soup slipping from her hands before she hit the tile floor. The diagnosis, aggressive multiple sclerosis, had come swiftly, along with a mountain of bills. In the weeks that followed, Tiana made a choice that didn't feel like a choice at all. She withdrew from Harvard, left behind her future, and stepped into the world of tipped labor and rotating schedules. "Table 12 needs more bread." Darren's voice snapped from behind the counter, yanking her out of memory. "Right away," Tiana called back, grabbing a basket and weaving between tables with practiced ease. She didn't complain. Complaining didn't pay co-pays. The sapphire table was beautiful, sleek, designed to feel upscale but approachable. Tall windows framed exposed brick, candles flickered on every table, and the silverware gleamed. But behind the polished surface, the place operated like every other restaurant she'd worked, understaffed, underpaid, and full of politics. Tiana had worked the same double shifts for over a year, lunch into dinner, noon to close. Most of the other servers, college students working for book money or car payments, came and went. They didn't stay long enough to learn who Darren really favored. "Hey, Tiana," came a chirpy voice behind her. It was Lindsay, blonde, 21, with the kind of flawless skin and effortless charm that made her a favorite among customers and Darren alike. "Can you cover my section for like 20 minutes? My boyfriend just showed up with Thai food and I really need to talk to him." Tiana paused. "I've got my own tables, Lindsay, and I've been here since noon." Lindsay tilted her head, pouting slightly. "Come on, remember when you stepped off the floor to take that call from your mom's doctor last week? I didn't rat you out." That call had lasted 7 minutes. She'd stood behind the walk-in fridge, tears brimming as the neurologist explained how the latest treatment was no longer working. Tiana exhaled. 20 minutes, no more. "Thank you, you're amazing," Lindsay squealed, already halfway to the front door. By 9 o'clock, Lindsay still hadn't returned. Tiana's feet throbbed inside her shoes. The arch support had collapsed 2 months ago, but she'd kept pushing off buying new ones. Every dollar counted. Her mother needed a new walker. The water heater had gone out. And now Darren was pinning next week's schedule on the corkboard. Tiana waited until the crowd cleared, then stepped forward, scanning the list. Her eyes stopped. 3 shifts. She usually had 7. Heart thudding, she followed Darren into the narrow office near the back hallway. "There must be a mistake," she said, holding the paper. "I'm down 4 shifts next week." "No mistake," he replied without looking up. "Lindsay asked for more hours. You'll adjust. She lives at home, I've got rent. And my mother—" "Not my problem," Darren cut in. "Schedule's final." Tiana didn't respond. She walked out slowly, lips pressed tight. She couldn't cry, not here, not in front of him. She still had 3 hours left in her shift, still had tips to earn. And somehow, some way, she'd figure it out. She always did. She just didn't know that before the night was over, the girl waiting alone at table 15, the one no one else had wanted to serve, was about to change everything. The last wave of dinner rush was thinning out when the hostess appeared beside Tiana, a bit flustered, her headset slightly askew. "Hey, table 15? Just the girl for now. She's alone, Dad's running late or something, nobody else wants it. Can you—" Her voice trailed off, already bracing for the no. Tiana glanced across the dining room. Table 15 was tucked into a quiet corner near the windows, away from the foot traffic. A young white girl, 10, maybe 11, sat at the edge of her seat, legs dangling just above the floor, a blue cast covering her right forearm up to the elbow. Her long, honey-blonde hair spilled over her shoulders, partially shielding her face as she picked at the corner of the kids' menu with her left hand. A glass of untouched water sat in front of her. Her wheelchair was parked just behind the chair she'd transferred into, its large wheels catching the low evening light. Tiana sighed softly. "Yeah, I'll take it." She tucked a small pad and pen into her apron, smoothed the front of her shirt, and made her way across the floor. "Good evening," she said gently, kneeling slightly so she could meet the girl's eyes without towering over her. "I'm Tiana, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. What's your name?" The girl hesitated. Her left hand fidgeted with the edge of her napkin. Then, barely audible, she said, "Lila." Tiana smiled. "It's very nice to meet you, Lila. Can I get you something to drink while you look over the menu? We've got lemonade, apple juice, strawberry soda." "Strawberry lemonade," Lila said, almost a whisper. "You got it. 1 strawberry lemonade coming right up." Tiana returned a few minutes later, balancing the drink on a small tray with a bendy straw already unwrapped and waiting. She noticed that Lila's shoulders tensed slightly as a group of servers passed by, laughing loudly near the kitchen doors. The cast on her arm rested awkwardly on the edge of the table. Tiana placed the drink in front of her and smiled again. "Here you go. 1 strawberry lemonade, extra chilled, just the way I like it too." She gave a little wink. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" Lila didn't answer. She stared down at the menu, her lips pressed tight. "Okay," Tiana said softly. "How about this? If you're hungry but not sure what to pick, I can tell you a secret. Our mac and cheese? It's the best in Boston. It's got 3 cheeses, toasted breadcrumbs, and it's not on the kids' menu, but I bet I can make it happen." Lila's eyes lifted slowly. She looked at Tiana, really looked. There was something uncertain behind those eyes, like she was waiting for permission to be a kid again. Then she gave the smallest nod. "Mac and cheese it is," Tiana said, writing it down like it was the most important order of the night. "I'll get that started for you, okay?" As she stood, she glanced back toward the main entrance, then froze. A tall man in a tailored gray overcoat had just stepped into the restaurant, scanning the room quickly. His face was tight with concern. It was clear from the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, that he wasn't used to being late. When he spotted Lila at the far table, a small measure of relief passed over his features, but he didn't approach. Instead, he gestured discreetly to the hostess and was seated 2 tables away, partially hidden behind a partition, his back to the dining room but his eyes on his daughter. Tiana noticed it all without slowing. Her years in food service had trained her to see what most didn't. She delivered a few refills, checked in on another table, then slipped into the kitchen to place Lila's order. When she returned, Lila was trying to adjust her cast, clearly frustrated as she tried to use the fork with her left hand. The mac and cheese had just been set down by another server, someone who hadn't stayed long enough to help. Tiana approached quietly. "Hey," she said, "may I sit for a moment?" She didn't wait for an answer, just pulled up a chair, facing Lila so they were eye level again. "Looks like that cast is making dinner a little tricky, huh?" Lila nodded slowly, cheeks flushed. Her fingers were clenched and her eyes were starting to shine, though no tears had fallen. Tiana kept her tone casual. "You know, when I was in medical school, well, almost, I learned that sometimes when one part of your body gets hurt, the other parts start working harder to help. Your brain is amazing like that." "You were a doctor?" Lila asked, voice soft but curious. Tiana smiled, correcting gently. "I was studying to be one, a pediatrician. That's a doctor for kids, but life had other plans for me." She demonstrated how to steady the fork with a different grip, supporting Lila's wrist gently as she guided her toward a successful bite. "There you go, look at that, your brain's already figuring things out." Lila chewed slowly, the tension easing from her face. "It's not broken," she said suddenly, lifting her cast, "just fractured. Skateboard accident. My fault, kinda." "Well, then that means it's healing," Tiana said. "And I bet you're pretty good at a lot of things that don't need 2 hands." Lila brightened just slightly. "I like to draw, but now I have to use my left hand." "That's impressive," Tiana replied genuinely. "Most people can't even draw with their good hand. I'm not even allowed near a pencil." Lila giggled, a sound so light and unexpected it made Tiana's chest tighten. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd heard a laugh like that. From someone who needed it. And across the restaurant, the man in the gray coat leaned forward, eyes fixed on his daughter. He'd heard the laugh too, and he stayed where he was, didn't interrupt, didn't call out. Just watched. Tiana stood slowly. "I've got to check on a few other tables, but I'll be back, okay? You just focus on the mac and cheese masterpiece." As she turned, she caught one more thing. The way Lila's eyes followed her, not with need, but with trust. And from 2 tables away, the man she didn't yet recognize as the owner of Sapphire Table watched her too. But unlike the last time someone had stared at her across a restaurant, this gaze wasn't cold, it was careful, curious, and perhaps quietly, beginning to hope. By the time the dessert menus were passed out, Lila was chatting, really chatting, not full conversations yet, but small, unguarded pieces of herself slipping out between bites of macaroni and sips of strawberry lemonade. She told Tiana about the cat her dad was allergic to but let her keep anyway, about the sketchbook she now had to use sideways because her right hand was on vacation, and about how weird everything felt since the accident. Tiana listened, not politely but attentively. She didn't interrupt or fill the silence. She let Lila take the lead even when the words came slow. It was the kind of attention the girl clearly wasn't used to. At one point, Tiana gently adjusted the napkin tucked under Lila's cast so it wouldn't press into her skin, and the girl didn't flinch. She smiled, not because she was being served, but because she felt seen. Nearby, Miles Whittaker watched. His coat was now folded neatly beside him. He hadn't touched the wine the server had brought. His eyes stayed on his daughter, and every so often a muscle in his jaw would twitch, not in anger, but something closer to regret. He had come prepared to apologize for being late. Instead, he sat in silence, watching his daughter laugh again after months of silence, after therapist after therapist had failed to crack the shell she'd sealed herself in. And the woman responsible wasn't a doctor. She was a waitress with tired shoes and a way of speaking that left no room for pity. Across the room, Darren's voice sliced through the quiet like a dull knife. "Hughes, you're falling behind. Jessica's been waiting on her drinks for 10 minutes. Tiona turned from Lila's table, face neutral. "I'm managing my section." "Then manage it faster," Darren snapped, "and stop babying the kid in the corner. This isn't a charity." A few customers turned their heads. Lila stiffened. Her fingers curled into the edge of the table. Tiana's jaw tensed, but her voice stayed even. "Her name is Lila, and she's not a charity case. She's a guest." Darren scoffed. "Just get the orders out before someone else drops the ball." He turned on his heel and stalked toward the bar. Tiana exhaled slowly. She returned to her section, smoothing her apron as she walked, but the sting lingered. When she passed table 15 again, Lila was watching her. "Is he always like that?" she asked softly. "Only on days that end in Y," Tiana said with a small smile. Lila giggled again, covering her mouth with her casted arm. From his seat, Miles leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. The smile on his face wasn't quite a smile. It was a realization, a calculation. A door he hadn't known was closed, now creaking open just enough to let something in. By the time Tiana brought the check, Leela had finished her meal and was coloring a small illustration on the back of the kids' menu. It looked like a crooked cat with two mismatched eyes, drawn left hand. "I think you're onto something," Tiana said, tapping the edge of the picture. "That could be a comic strip someday. You should give him a name." "Maybe," Leela scrunched her face. "Crash." Tiana laughed. "Crash the cat. I like it." She reached into her apron and pulled out a small pack of crayons. "On the house," she said, "and for the record, I think Crash has a lot of stories left to tell." Lila beamed, and that smile, wide, toothy, full of pride, landed harder than anything Miles had expected to feel tonight. When the check came, Miles stood quietly and walked over, slipping his card into the leather folio. He didn't introduce himself, not yet. Tiana processed it without comment, handing it back with her usual professionalism. She didn't notice the name printed on the card, Miles Whitaker. As she returned it, he slid something into her hand. A folded $100 bill. "You made this evening easier than it should have been," he said quietly. "Thank you." Tiana hesitated, caught off guard. "Just doing my job?" "No," he said, "you were doing far more than that." Before she could respond, Darren appeared again, this time with a clipboard in one hand and annoyance in the other. "Tiana. Office." "Now." She looked from Lila to Miles, who was watching Darren now with new interest. "I'm just finishing up with my tables," she said, not raising her voice. "I said now." Miles turned to his daughter. "You good for a second, sweetheart?" Leela nodded. "I'm finishing, Crash." He looked back at Tiana, and this time the gaze held something different. Not curiosity, not politeness. Intent. She nodded once, then followed Darren toward the back hallway, shoulders squared. She didn't know it yet, but every step away from that table was walking her closer to the moment her life would change. And sitting at table 15, Lila continued to color, calm, focused, her world already altered by a woman she'd only met an hour ago. The hallway behind the kitchen was narrow and hot, filled with the faint smell of fryer oil and cheap cologne. Tiana followed Darren toward the back office, heart steady even as her body buzzed with exhaustion. Her shoes stuck slightly to the tile with every step, soles long past worn thin. The office door was already ajar, fluorescent light flickering overhead like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive. "Close the door," Darren said, not looking at her. Tiana stepped inside and pulled it shut. The space was cramped, cluttered with old menus, disorganized invoices, and a plastic ficus that hadn't been dusted in years. Darren dropped into his chair with a theatrical sigh, the fake leather creaking beneath his weight. "You want to explain what that was out there?" he said, gesturing vaguely toward the dining room. I was helping a guest, she replied evenly. She needed assistance using her utensils, the cast. Darren cut her off with a dismissive wave. I don't care if she had her leg in a sling. This is a restaurant, not a rehab center. You spent almost half an hour at one table while Jessica had to cover for you. Jessica's been gone for over an hour. She left to meet her boyfriend, Tiana said, trying to keep her voice steady. Darren smirked. She asked, you agreed you'd take responsibility. He leaned back, fingers laced behind his head. Look, this isn't personal, Tiana, it's business. I need servers who turn tables, not social workers with sob stories. She didn't speak. There was nothing to say. I'm making a note in your file, Darren continued. And since we're being honest, I've cut your shifts again next week. 1 lunch, 1 dinner. The words hit harder than she expected. 2 shifts, that wouldn't even cover gas. Darren, please, I need those hours. My mother... Your mother's medical bills are not this restaurant's problem, he snapped, suddenly impatient. Jessica brings in more tips, customers like her. She doesn't lecture me about fairness, and she doesn't turn her section into a therapy circle. Tiana stood straighter, hands clenched at her sides. I don't ask for special treatment. I work harder than anyone here. Darren reached into the drawer and pulled out a small envelope. Tonight's tips redistributed under the new pooling policy he'd put in place a month ago. She took it silently, the weight too light in her hand. She already knew what it meant. You'll be here Tuesday, he said, already turning back to his computer screen. Don't be late. Tiana left without a word. She walked past the empty booths, through the quiet lobby, out into the cool night air. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just a few lingering tail lights blinking in the distance. She made it to her car, her old Honda Civic, 15 years and counting, before she opened the envelope. $43. 10 hours, dozens of guests, at least $120 worth of tips before the split. She didn't cry. Not yet. Crying didn't fix anything. Crying didn't pay for her mother's MS injections or the water bill currently sitting under a magnet on their refrigerator with the words, Final Notice, printed in red. It was past midnight by the time she eased the front door open to their small apartment on the 2nd floor of a quiet, crumbling complex just off Massachusetts Avenue. The hall light was still on, a faint hum from the kitchen, the scent of lentil soup lingering from earlier. Tiana slipped off her shoes and moved quietly down the hall. She peeked into the bedroom where Dorothy Hughes lay sleeping, a soft fleece blanket pulled to her chin. A medication chart rested neatly on the bedside table, checked and initialed by Mrs. Chen. Bless her. The woman from down the hall had agreed to sit with Dorothy during Tiana's shifts, refusing to take more than a few bags of groceries in return. In the kitchen, she set the envelope beside the unpaid bills and slumped into a chair. The silence of the room pressed in from all sides. The overhead light flickered once, then held. She opened her laptop out of habit, unsure whether she wanted answers or distractions. The Harvard Med portal was still bookmarked. It opened with a chime. A red notification bubble blinked. One new message. From Rodman. Subject: Pediatric Neurology Fellowship, late application. Tiana stared at it, her hands hovered, then clicked. Tiana, I never unsubscribed your student credentials. I couldn't, not after the potential I saw. A position has opened again, pediatric neurology, partial research, full clinical rotation, full tuition remission plus stipend. The deadline was yesterday. But I've convinced the committee to look at a late submission if it comes from you. Please call me. Rodman. Her chest tightened. She opened her inbox, scanned for missed emails. There it was. A formal application email dated 3 weeks ago. She hadn't seen it. She'd been working double shifts every day that week. Tiana typed quickly, her fingers flying over the keys. A reply, a plea, an apology, a desperate hope. When she hit send, it was already 2:17 a.m. She closed the laptop, sat back, and stared at nothing. Even if Dr. Rodman said yes, even if she got the position, how? Who would care for her mother? What would pay the bills until the stipend kicked in? The alarm on her phone buzzed 3 hours later. 6 o'clock IM time for her mother's first dose. She rose, poured a glass of water, counted the pills, and placed them gently on a napkin. Her hands moved automatically now, the way someone's might braid hair they know by heart. A knock came at the door, sharp, measured. Tiana blinked. No one knocked at this hour. She glanced at the clock again. 6:07 a.m. She moved toward the door, cautious, peered through the peephole. A courier stood outside, holding a thick envelope. When she opened it, he said simply, "Tiana Hughes?" She nodded. Signature required. She signed, hands cold, took the envelope. Heavy, cream-colored, embossed with an unfamiliar logo. Whitaker Holdings, Cambridge office. Inside was a single card and a letter. The card read, "Miles Whitaker, CEO, Whitaker Restaurant Group." The letter, "Miss Hughes, last night you showed my daughter a level of care and respect that reached her in a way no specialist, no educator, and no counselor has been able to in over a year. You did this without knowing who she was, or who I am, and that makes it even more extraordinary. My car will arrive at your address at 9:00 a.m. to bring you to my office, should you choose to accept the invitation. The driver will wait 10 minutes. Lila asks that you come. She says you're the first person who ever looked her in the eye and treated her like she wasn't broken. Respectfully, Miles Whitaker." Tiana read it once, then again. Her fingers shook. Her pulse roared in her ears. She looked down the hall toward her mother's door, then back at the letter. The clock ticked past 6:15. The sky outside was starting to brighten, and with it something else, something she hadn't let herself feel in a long, long time. Possibility. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the sleek black town car pulled up in front of the worn Cambridge apartment building. Tiana stood by the window, fully dressed in her only professional outfit, a navy blazer, pressed slacks, low heels, and the same pearl-stud earrings she used to wear on her clinical rounds. She'd almost forgotten how it felt to wear them. She had kissed her mother's forehead gently, whispered that she'd be back soon, and left Mrs. Chen with a full list of medications and instructions taped to the fridge. Then she stepped into the car, unsure if her world was ending or beginning again. The elevator opened onto the 40th floor of a glass and steel office building overlooking the Charles River. The receptionist barely had time to greet her before a familiar voice called out, "Tiana." Leela sat in a small waiting area near the windows, her wheelchair positioned beside a round table covered in pastries, sketchbooks, and a tall glass of strawberry lemonade. "I told Dad you'd come," Lila said with a grin that lit up the entire corner. "He's on a call, but he said I could start breakfast without him. You should eat too. Adults forget." Tiana smiled, already easing into the chair beside her. "Strawberry lemonade before 10 a.m.? You must have connections." "I do," Lila said proudly, pushing a chocolate croissant toward her. "And a question. If brains can rewire after an accident, does that mean I can still be who I used to be?" Tiana paused, then leaned forward. "I think you can be someone even stronger." By the time Miles entered the room 10 minutes later, the two of them were hunched over a sketchbook, deep into designing a comic about Crash the cat, complete with sidekick crutches and an arch-nemesis named Gravity. Miles watched them a moment before clearing his throat. "I see I've been replaced," he said, smiling faintly. Leela rolled her eyes. "It's not a competition, Dad. But if it was, I'd still pick her." Miles turned serious as he gestured Tiana into the adjoining conference room. She followed, pulse steady. She was ready now. No matter what this was, she'd face it head-on. "I imagine you have questions," he began. "Only one," Tiana replied. "Why me?" Miles didn't sit. He stood near the window, arms crossed, not defensive but reflective. "Because last night I saw my daughter laugh. I heard her speak. And I saw someone treat her like a person instead of a diagnosis." He slid a folder across the table. "I hadn't planned to be at the restaurant. I showed up late, saw her at that table, and stayed out of sight. What I witnessed was remarkable. What I learned after was unacceptable." Inside the folder were financial records, employee logs, and her own personnel file. Highlighted were discrepancies in tip distribution, scheduling abuses, even internal complaints never processed. "Darren was terminated this morning," Miles said plainly. "There'll be an audit. The staff will be protected. You should have been protected." Tiana said nothing, scanning the documents. This wasn't a gesture. This was accountability. "I'd like to offer you 3 options," he continued. "The first, general manager at Sapphire Table, effective immediately, triple salary, full benefits." Tiana blinked but didn't speak. "Second, join our community health initiative. We partner with clinics across underserved areas. It would utilize your medical training and come with higher pay, plus housing assistance." Still, she waited. "Third," Miles said, sliding a second envelope toward her. "Return to Harvard Med, full tuition, housing for both you and your mother, in-home care covered. Dr. Rodman is expecting your call." Tiana stared at the envelope. Her name was printed across the top in bold font. She didn't touch it. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked. "I'm not your project. I'm not a pity case. And I won't be someone's hired emotional insurance." Miles nodded slowly. "You're none of those things. This isn't charity, Miss Hughes. It's recognition of skill, of integrity, and of the difference one person can make in another's life." Her voice steadied. "If I do this, it's not to be anyone's personal doctor. Not for your daughter, not for you." "I wouldn't want it any other way," he said. She looked toward the door, where Lila's laughter filtered through the glass. "She said I helped her breathe," Tiana whispered. "She wasn't wrong," Miles replied. Then Tiana smiled. Small, certain. "Then yes, I think I know which path I'm taking." 1 year later. The lecture hall at Harvard Medical buzzed with early morning chatter. Tiana sat in the front row, white coat crisp, name embroidered in navy thread. T. Hughes, M.S., candidate, pediatric neurology. Her notes were color-coded, her tablet open to slides on neuroplasticity and fine motor rehabilitation. She was back, and this time nothing would pull her away. Her phone buzzed beside her, a message from her mom. "Therapy went great today. Lila's drawing again. Dinner at our place. I'm making the casserole you hate." She smiled. Later that evening, she stood at the threshold of the Lila Whitaker Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation, a sleek, sunlit facility built with child-friendly therapy spaces, designed by architects with input from one very particular 10-year-old girl. Inside the lobby, a framed drawing hung near the entrance. 3 stick figures stood in front of a hospital: Dad, Sam, and me. Underneath, in Lila's handwriting, "She saw me when no one else did. Now we'll help other kids be seen too." As Tiana read those words, she felt it again, that quiet, steady knowing that the life she thought she lost hadn't ended, it had simply rerouted. Sometimes the future waits at a corner table. Sometimes it begins with mac and cheese and a coloring page, and sometimes it arrives exactly when it's meant to, rebuilt from the broken and stronger for it. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.